and introduce myself, then I'll introduce Jen and Lisa, and we'll go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tiffany Feingold. I am the co-founder of Guiding Bright Minds. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Guiding Bright Minds, my husband and I launched Guiding Bright Minds about a year and a half ago now. We are a parent of a neurodiverse child ourselves. So we knew firsthand how overwhelming and exhausting and just long that journey can be, of the road of figuring out what my options are, what my choices are, what do I do, where do I go. My husband also grew up with dyslexia and ADHD, and at a young age he struggled significantly through his early years in trying to figure out, why he wasn't adapting as well as the other kids with the reading, the out-of-the-box learner, and what that meant for him. And so because of his own personal experience and then our experience with our son, we wanted to help other parents on their journey. We wanted to put together a resource that really takes parents on understanding what is dyslexia, what is autism, what is the autism spectrum disorder, what are my choices, how do I get assessed, what's the difference between a medical assessment and an educational assessment. There's so many choices, there's so many resources, and so we wanted to put it all in one place. So I will put in the chat a link to Guiding Bright Minds. I'll also add how you can become a member for free and get access to all those tools and resources. We host 2 free webinars every month. Our next one coming up is actually focused on assessments, advocacy, and diagnosis. So what are the differences? How do you get assessed? To look for in the diagnosis, and then how to advocate for your child. So more information on that. And we have an events page on our website, www.guidingbrightminds.com, where you can look at all that. And then we have tons of resources, both from our professionals that are part of our community and from Guiding Bright Minds in various articles. One of the things that we wanted to do, and one of the highest priorities of creating Guiding Bright Minds, is how to connect you with professionals. I know that process can take a while, figuring out what's going to be the best fit for my child. Where do I begin with services? And so, partners like Temple Grandin School and what they provide and how they specialize in working with our neurodiverse kids is transformational. And that's where I wanted to also help, is how do you find those resources and tools, and how do you connect with them? So that's one of the other things. And then we also created certain events like birthday buddies here in Colorado to support children, so no child goes without having a birthday celebrated. So we're constantly looking at ways and how to support you as parents, and we'd love your feedback. If you go to our website, there's an opportunity for questions, comments, all kinds of things. So we'd love to hear from you. What are you looking for? What would you like to hear about? What specialists would you like to hear from and have an opportunity to ask questions to? So definitely let me know. I appreciate your time today. And let me go ahead and introduce, I'm excited for this topic, because we know transitions can be difficult as we go from, your child at home to the first time in school, from their first time in school to elementary school to junior high to high school to whatever comes next after high school. So today we're going to be talking about launching your neurodiverse teen, tools from Temple Grandin School for fostering independence. So excited to hear about, the years of experience they've had in working with families and kids, and their expertise and advice, I guess, on what those next steps look like, from their experience. So let me first introduce Jennifer Wilger, who is the co-founder and executive director of Temple Grandin School in Boulder. Jennifer is the parent of a young adult son with Asperger's syndrome, a proud member of Temple Grandin School's first graduating class, who is now pursuing his master's of divinity degree in Seattle Pacific University. Since 1998, Jennifer has devoted intense time to study to understanding neurodiverse learning styles, and was excited to contribute to the founding of Temple Grandin School in 2011. Jennifer's passion for creating dynamic supportive learning Community spans a wide variety of ages and settings, from preschool to high school. Prior to TGS, she worked as a special educator, preschool teacher, freelance writer, and curriculum development specialist. At TGS, Jennifer is a resource for staff, students, and families, and guides Temple Grandin's collaboration with community partners for research, current program planning, and future organizational development. So thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Lisa Baba is a BCBA at Temple Grandin's Director of Community Relations. She is passionate about neurodiverse people, understanding and embracing who they are, including expressing their unique abilities and interests in the world. As well, she loves to support parents along their journey of guiding their children toward adulthood while maintaining their own sense of self and pursuing their own dreams. Lisa has a background in publishing, a certification in life coaching, and credential as a board certified behavior analyst, and experience in parenting her own neurodiverse young adult children. With these tools, Lisa communicates Temple Grandin School's vision, mission, values, and events to students, parents, alumni parents, community partners, donors, the Boulder community, and the global neurodiverse community. So thank you both for being here, and I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tiffany. We are excited to be here. This is a really near and dear topic to us as a program, and to Lisa and myself personally as parents of young adults who have fairly recently made or are making those transitions. So go ahead, Lisa, if you want to put up our slide deck. We're going to walk through some tips for you. And I see in the chat at least one of you, and probably more of you, who have experiences of your own. So I will just throw out there that Lisa and Tiffany are going to be moderating and monitoring the chat. And please feel free to add your questions or comments. We want to make this a conversation, because we are certainly not the only keepers of good ideas in this realm. So we are talking about launching Neurodiverse Teen. A little bit more about me relative to this particular topic. Lisa, you can put up the next slide. So this is my son, Micah, and he has actually finished his Master's of Divinity degree. I should have told Tiffany we could update that. So yes, he graduated in June, and has now taken on his first adult job as a history teacher, working in a small school. I think it's maybe not too different than Temple Grandin School, but I haven't had a chance yet to get up there and see what they've got going on. But anyway, he's been living independently, and so we are real excited about that. And then in my role at Temple Grandin School, we've seen over 100 students have come through our school in our 12-year career as a school. And we have had 27 graduate at this point. And so of those, 93% or so are attending college or in careers. And, you know, they have varying degrees of how they're living independently. And so we're going to unpack a little bit of that today in terms of what does that mean to live independently. Of our graduates, maybe a third went straight to a four-year college, and the rest have some variance on that path. But let's just move on and get into the nitty-gritty. So here's the big question, right? And parents ask us, Lisa works a lot with our parents at TGS, and when they come to visit and assess whether or not they want to make a school choice to a specialized program like Temple Grandin, they want to know, is my child going to be independent? And that's the $64 million question, right? If we can answer that with a yes, we are all rejoicing and excited. If we're not sure, you know, that creates some anxiety for us as parents. But we're going to talk about ways that you can help launch your child, move along on that journey to get an answer to that question. We'll look at 5 tools or tips for fostering independence, and then leave plenty of time for us to talk about any questions or tips that you all have that you want to add. So the first tip we look to is, excuse me, goodness. Self-knowledge. So in order for kids to be independent, for teenagers to take that step into finding their place and their contribution in the world, they need to know themselves. And it sounds fairly obvious and self-explanatory, but in reality, it is harder to do, and it has multiple parts. So we talk a lot at Temple Grandin School, and hopefully with other providers you've encountered, certainly Guiding Bright Minds would be one of those, about the strengths of this population of kids. All of them have things that they do better than anyone else in the world. All of them have interests that they maybe know more about than anyone else in the world and would be happy to tell you. But the trick is kind of channeling that into a career. And then we move on from strengths to look then at also challenges. So what are the things that might potentially impede or get in the way of them addressing and realizing those strengths? And how do both of those things relate to environments? Go back one more a little bit, Lisa. So when you think about the strengths and the self-knowledge, it's important to focus with the students on what they can do first and foremost. So talking about what they can do, not what they can't do, and then taking those things and aligning them with possible career choices. There's a long and often winding path between high school and adult career. I mean, I think of my own son, who I think has had a fairly successful, what people would deem a successful trajectory. You know, it's been almost 10 years for him to get all the way through his path of education and into now what will potentially be a career. So that the path may be longer, and the end might not be what you think. You know, with the Masters of Divinity, you wouldn't necessarily think history teacher. But when you're thinking about what is the end, you think about the strengths, the challenges, the environmental needs. So what kinds of environments would lend themselves to the strengths and challenges? And sometimes you have to break that down really specifically for students, because they might envision a career that maybe aligns with an interest, but there might be the setting that that career happens, or the kinds of interactions that they would need to have with people, or the communications that they would need to do with outside providers related to that business that might be challenging. And it might be a just right challenge if they understand what it is and they have strategies to work around it. Or it might be a challenge that, you know, is so heavy and crushing that they would want to choose a different path or have to detour around. So lots of things to think about there. And then the other thing I would say about challenges, just in general, is that it's important to normalize those for our students, because we all have challenges. We're all human. We all have things we're good at, things we're not as good at. And sometimes they can feel isolated when their challenges are talked about or drawn out or worked on, that they're the only ones that this is hard for. Chances are there's lots of other people who have a particular challenge that they share, but just in general, we all have things that we're working on, and how we handle those things and what we do as a result of challenges and failures often can be as meaningful as anything else in our quest to find our place in the world. Okay. The second tip that we would offer is to identify your support system. This is something we do in every family meeting at Temple Grandin School. We talk about the strengths and the challenges, and then we come back down to, okay, who's your supports? Who are the people who are on team student, team Micah in my case, the people who support you, who have cheered you on, who will continue to root for your success, and who will be willing, if needed, to actually step into your life and do things with you and for you to help you meet your goals. So family would be obviously a place to start, but you know, that even is not all that simple. There can be challenges in relating to our teenagers, as all of us who are parents of teenagers know. So as a parent, you may or may not end up on the support list at any given time, which is why it's important to expand your support system beyond just that nuclear, that direct linked family, to maybe friends who have different strengths that can help, professional teams. So if your student has a therapist or other providers, particularly if you've been with them long enough to develop relationships, those folks are definitely part of your student's support system and have a voice that your student will hopefully consider in listening to options. Then moving on, out of secondary into the bigger world, there are new resources, right? They've had an IEP maybe, or a 504, there are no IEPs in college. So it comes back down to, again, that self-knowledge piece of students knowing what their needs are and being able to advocate for them as they move into adult post-secondary settings. So disability support, sometimes it's called student success, which I like better than disability support, frankly. Lots of different names for that office, that academic support, depending on the college, they will call it what they will, but most colleges have at least some opportunities for that. And then also not to neglect disability vocation resources. So Voc Rehab with our students and many students in Colorado work through the SWAP program. That's the School to Work Alliance program, SWAP for short. And they have a wealth of counselors and folks that can help students get into internships and job shadowing and just explore the world of work that is not really open to them until they come of age. Okay. Number 3 is self-care strategies. And so I love this visual that Lisa found for us that has all the different, not all, it's probably not even an exclusive list, but different sort of domains or spheres that self-care comes into play. It's not just sleep and exercise. It's your stress management. It's the way you interact with others. It's perspective taking. It's your boundaries. It's the ability to ask for help. And so all of these self-care pieces need to be tended to, and with individual students, you might have more of one or more of another, but taking care of yourself is paramount to being able to put yourself in a community with other people. So for students on the spectrum, these things might include things that we might typically see as more autistic. I've talked to a lot of students who feel like self-stimulation, those kinds of behaviors are really regulating and soothing for them. And so finding ways that they can continue to use those strategies while in a social setting that may not understand them fully. So there might be some advocacy around that. There might be some shaping of that. We have several students in our school now who are approaching the end of high school, and they feel better if they pace, or they feel better if they're leaning, they've got full body support against a wall or on the floor. And so we've worked with them, and it's challenging sometimes just to say, okay, rubber's going to meet the road here soon. You're probably not going to be able to lie on the floor while you do your job with your computer. So does that mean you need to find a different seating strategy that works for you if you're going to be at a desk? Or does that really mean I know I can't, so I need to find a profession that allows me to have more movement in my day, or to be standing rather than sitting? There's a lot of little environmental pieces like that you don't think of when you think of, I'm going to be a video game designer, or I'm going to be a lawyer, or whatever it is that students are pursuing. And we do believe they can pursue whatever it is that they're called to do. But those little sort of nuanced, fine-grained environmental factors may be a little bit more important for this population of students. Okay, then experiential learning. So really practicing these skills, and it can be the whole package, or it can be individual skills in isolation. So there's a whole suite of skills just around, where am I going to live? And for some students, they need their own space. So if they're going to college, they might want a single room. For other students, we've discovered, or they've told us, that it's kind of lonely having a single room, and it doesn't force them to reach out and to take those risks and to make those social connections in the same way. So depending on, again, that self-knowledge piece, know yourself, which of those things is going to impact your learning and your experience in a post-secondary environment more. We have had a lot of students who have chosen to live with or close to their parents, especially as they're advancing through post-secondary. So I think it's important to take the whole picture and say, just because I can't have the whole pie, or the whole pie in the way that my parents had, or I think society wants, doesn't mean I don't get any dessert, right? That means I'll start by focusing on school. And so in order to have the energy to do the social pieces, to focus on school, I'm not going to do the life skills pieces right now. Or you might decide it's really important to me to get away from my parents, or to have that independence, or to have something that is more demonstrative of taking that next step. And so maybe it is just the living situation, and you work on those things first and limit the classes or the education to go a little slower. Take a class or take a couple of classes and step it up as the other things get a little bit more habitual and routine. But there's a whole host of things. You know, there's financial things, there's bank accounts, there's taxes, there's writing checks, or, you know, online safety with credit cards. All of those things are a part of living independently. And so as a parent, you know, we want to give them opportunities to practice those skills as they're comfortable, and then just push them along a little bit at a time. Then with the career pieces, there's lots of steps to that too. And I've talked a little bit about it already, just in terms of looking at the environment a little bit closer. But what about students who don't know what they want to do? They maybe know what their strengths are, but how does that translate into a career? And for some, there's maybe not a clear connection, or maybe there is, but it's a really difficult career field. We have so many students who want to be video game designers, and a lot of them do have some of the skills, certainly the focus, and some of them have graphic design and the visual thinking skills, but that's a really tough field to crack into. And so as parents and providers, we can maybe show them, based on their strengths, what are some other fields that you might try, that you might explore, that might use some of these strengths you might find that you like or not. So while they're still in high school, or as they're transitioning, deciding what's going to be next, volunteering can be a great way to experience different types of workplaces or work environments, while also making a meaningful difference and giving back to the community. Internships are great. And often when we think of internships, we think of the internships that maybe we had in college, or, you know, student teaching is an example, where you go and you take over and you really kind of are doing the job on a trial basis. But there's lots of shades or gradations of smaller starting points for internships. Students can just go and sit in meetings. Students can be given a project. For our students, we typically require that they do 8 site visits in an internship. So they need to spend at least 25 hours, and they have to go at least 8 times. So that kind of bumps up the social, that they keep going and they get in a routine of what's going on in that workplace. And the other thing that internships really help with our kids, I mean, they could be totally unrelated to the thing that they think they want to do. It's just those soft skills of being in a workplace, and, as Temple Grandin likes to say, doing what the boss tells you to do. So a lot of these kids have great ideas, and they have out of the box thinking that I think when they get to the right place, or starting now, you know, they have ideas to contribute, but they also need to learn about starting in a job, and that you don't work for yourself or run your own ship from the beginning. And that's, that's something we all need to learn. And for some reason, it sometimes feels a little more challenging for these kids. So supporting them and understanding where they're starting from and kind of seeing the path to where that will get them by having those skills. And then the last piece is just that college course. We love to see high school students taking college courses. And in the students that we work with, the typical introductory community college courses are very accessible. And community colleges frequently, because they see such a wide range of people from all ages and stages and backgrounds, they feel a little easier for our students to access. They maybe don't stand out as much as being different because everyone is different and coming from a different place. So we feel like taking a college course while they're still at home, while they're still in high school, we actually require it of our students before they graduate from Temple Grandin School, helps them to master some of those life skills pieces, those real world pieces and executive function pieces that nobody really tells you about or prepares you for when you step up to college. So it's not the same thing as taking an AP class or taking an IB class or taking an online course. Those are more about accelerating the content, which is great for kids who have passions and interests. But really what this college step while in high school helps them accomplish is, what is it like to have to manage that? And can I do it? Can I not do it? What help do I need? It really kind of shines the spotlight on that support piece, as well as that advocacy piece, to show them while they're still in a safe place with their support system, what they're going to need to master to advance on that education track. That was a lot. And then the last one of the 5 tools that we're talking about is collaborative communication. So really listening to your students and making that a back and forth process. So taking the time to hear out and to drill down and to ask them to, as much as they are comfortable, really share all of their concerns with you, their goals, their dreams, their worries, their anxieties. And then you as the parent listening to that and bringing your own experience. But the listening part really has to come first. I can't stress that enough. They're not going to listen to you unless they feel that you've listened to them and they feel understood. So talking with them about their living situation, and it may not be what you think it would be. When I think about myself at that age and anyone else in the, I'm going to say 50 something age frame, maybe 40 to 60, the Gen X boomer, our generations, adulthood came a lot more abruptly and sooner and quickly than it does today, even for neurotypical kids. I was reading a book recently about the teenage brain, and they were advocating that really that period of adolescence where the brain development and the executive function development are accelerating goes all the way into the middle 20s for neurotypical kids. And so for our kids, it could go even longer. And so the idea that we grew up with, that you finish college and you start a family or you start a job by, it's all tied up neatly by 30 is not really the reality that we're living in today. And so resetting our own expectations to listen to what's going on in our world, and more specifically, what's going on with our neurodiverse teenage budding adult students, what they're comfortable with living. Again, they may want to get out right away, or that might be really scary to them. And so staying at home while they're attaining some education can be a great balance. Where they want to go for education. So that could be a whole topic in and of itself. I won't go too much into detail, but are they comfortable building block by block, or are they ready to declare a major, to go away from home, or to enroll in a 4-year school? I'm a firm believer that college can be for everyone who wants it, and that there are so many different kinds of colleges that finding the right kind of college is really key for success in our situation. And we've had a couple of our graduates who have had the same experience going, if they're away, to a smaller college where people can know them, and the on-ramps to finding your tribe and your community around interests are a little bit more paved, if you will. They have interest fairs and club fairs, and it was really easy for Micah to see where he would fit into the small college that he attended. But then there are other students who want to not maybe just get by, but they maybe don't want so much to be known about their challenges and their identity as a neurodiverse person. And so maybe for that type of a student, a larger college with supports would be better. And you aren't going to know unless you listen to your student and maybe visit, go to some campuses, see how it feels to them to be in a particular place or distance from home or type of campus. Jobs are great too. Some students, really want that independence piece and the income piece. And so they're often running in the first job that comes their way. Others are a little bit more nervous about interviews and the whole process of getting a job. So that would be something to discuss. Community is a big one that maybe doesn't get addressed as much as those first three, to think about how they're going to find a community, because chances are in high school, they've got some degree of community, whether it's at their school, or maybe you're part of a faith community, or you've got a network of friends with kids the same age, or they participate in a club or a sport. Those are communities that they've already built. And so when they take a step away from you to the next situation, what are they looking for and how are they going to find it? Those are good things to talk about. And then relationships, how are they going to build friendships? Are they interested in dating? And again, that could be another whole seminar series as well. How to stay safe in all of that. So lots and lots and lots of things you can talk about around independence. And I would say probably for these conversations, you don't want to take on too much at once. And if you can open the door and have the conversations starting as soon as you can, as gently as you can, you're gonna together form a vision of what the next steps are going to look like that will help you to build the way to get there. So then I'm going to wrap up my talking and go to the chat in just a moment, but I'm going to go through just a few suggestions from our community of parents. And Lisa has done a lot of work with our parent community, asking them things about their own kids, about what they would advise of their parents. And so these are just 4 B's that our parents have suggested. So being patient. Again, we've talked about the timeline, maybe beyond the traditional 4 years, or maybe it's 4 to 6, that's traditional now, who knows? Or maybe there's a longer gap between finishing high school and when they start the next thing. Whatever it works for your student, be patient with them about it. Be supportive. So encourage them if they, well, maybe I might want to do this. Well, okay, if they express an interest, bring the resources, bring the information, take them to the places, help them flesh out what would that idea look like without, it's a fine line, right? With being supportive and saying, great, that's what we're going to do. Oftentimes they need a little bit more just information around that to understand how it would feel, what it would look like to actually live out that choice that they're kicking around in their brain. Being attentive. So again, starting this sooner to knowing what are those things that might get in the way. What are those things that your child is expressing interest or excitement about, that they might not say, I want to do this, but you've noticed that they're really good at something, or, every time they try and start something, this gets in the way. So just paying attention and gently bringing those things that you've noticed to their attention for verification, because we are noticing from the outside, we are not on the inside. So it's really important to both notice, but verify, is that actually how they're thinking or feeling? And then the last one is to be intentional. Time goes by really quickly. The teen years, from start to finish, it's 6 or 7 years, but you get to, before you know it, you're done with middle school, and then you start high school, and before you know it, you're halfway through high school, and then your student is on the horizon of finishing high school, and what's next? So the sooner you can get started and to set aside time. So have coffee dates, or maybe just make a point of, when you're driving in the car, to ask a single question. There's lots of different ways to be intentional, but it won't happen without you and your student devoting time. So, question and answer. This is the part where we all get to share our wisdom.
So we have a couple in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. But if you guys all see at the bottom, it says Q&A. If you have any questions, please add those in there as well, and we'll go through that. Thank you so much for this. So somebody said, I have a 10-year-old daughter with high functioning ASD who also has generalized anxiety and depression. She's on a 5-4 and has support at school and home. However, I'm really nervous about her transition to middle school. Can you talk about this for girls in particular? She's an expert at masking.
Yes, many girls find themselves in that situation. So I guess I would wonder how comfortable she is with knowing her diagnosis and being able to advocate for that. Middle school is tricky. And frankly, that's why we started our school at the middle school age. So I think in general, getting into middle school, finding a tribe of friends, or identifying a safe teacher or counselor who can be a check-in person for those anxious moments would be helpful.
All right, and I want to read one, and I think this is a good example of just various tries, but here's one mom's experience. We did research, picked a small campus, found a good disability services office, sent her twice exceptional autistic daughter as she crashed and burned. She had to return, take a semester off, get back into therapy, go to the local school while living at home, finished her BA, crashed again, third try, luckily did pastry school, has her diploma as a pastry chef, has worked her way up to manager of a very small wholesale bakery, lives at home, but is otherwise completely independent with her life. She's 27 and we're so proud of her. So
that is fantastic. And honestly, that's a lot of times the way that these things go. Yeah. I think it's more the exception than the rule that kids will go straight from high school to 4-year college and get a job. I mean, that's probably the exception in the world at large too, frankly. But so many of our students have had paths like this. And this is part of the reason why we've backed it up and are starting them to try the college experiences while they're still in high school, because these things do happen. And they're able to pick themselves up and retry. And it looks like, as your daughter has maybe experienced, eventually the retries, something sticks, and that is the thing that can carry them forward. But sometimes it does take a few tries to find it. And I guess my advice would be not to be discouraged by that, and not to communicate with your student that, oh, that didn't work and we're so disappointed. Obviously, if you're here, you're probably not going to be in that mindset, I hope. But it is important to, again, support their efforts and maybe help them to understand if something doesn't work, why it didn't work, so that the next choice they make would avoid crashing for that same reason.
Yeah, that's great advice. A question that came in is, can you please share the information on the school to career program you discussed for internships, job shadowing, etc.? Do you have to have proof of diagnosis?
So I think for the SWAP program, you probably do. That runs through the Division of Vocational Rehab, and they work with the schools. So every school district has a SWAP counselor. So for our school, for instance, we are in the Boulder Valley School District, but we have students that live in neighboring school districts around. So we've worked with 2 or 3 different districts around the SWAP program. And I do think you have to have some diagnostic
Yeah, and somebody just said,
evidence.
for SWAP, if you have a 504 IEP, you're automatically qualified.
That may be right, yeah, because it runs through the schools.
Do we have any other questions, any other comments that you guys would like to ask Jen or Lisa while we have them right now? Anything else that you guys would like to add as far as just the experience of, you know, questions that you get on a daily basis from parents? Oh, I think that there might be some more coming in.
Good.
One asked, is SWAP for high schoolers?
Yes.
All right. And have a high functioning 13-year-old son, and he is transitioning to high school. Tips for exploring interests.
You know, I would say for interests in high school, clubs can be a good source. Electives, I know a lot of high schools have electives, and I feel like it's coming back now. There used to be a lot more practical arts, as they were called, or hands-on vocational kinds of electives that went away for a while, but they're starting to come back, and at the community colleges too, which would be another great place for a high school student, by the way, if you want to explore something that's not offered in a high school. Most community colleges they may have a minimum age, but I think they're open at least from mid-high school on for community-based enrollments. And even some of the 4-year schools have community ed ways that you can register for courses. And if it's something that you might be interested in as well, you know, maybe do it with your teenager if they'll tolerate that. I know some some do and some do not, but sometimes a shared interest is one way that you can kind of foster that relationship for yourself as well. After school clubs, community-based activities, Guiding Bright Minds, I'm sure keeps a list of activities and things that are appropriate for neurodiverse kinds of kiddos.
Yes, yes. Another question, have high functioning, oh, we already said that, tips and interest. Now, as far as, there's some questions coming in on waivers and chronic illnesses and incomes and supplemental insurance. Do you guys have information or knowledge? Would you be able to address that, or is that for a different conversation?
Yeah, that would probably be for a different conversation. We actually do have one of our parents of our graduates is serving on a board or a committee or something working with that. So we have had students come through who have accessed some of those things. It's challenging. That's all I can say about it.
Yes, you know, and that's, you know, one of the things that I will host to Monica is a presentation dedicated directly to Medicaid waivers,
Yeah.
that whole process, supplemental insurance. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I know that is definitely a deep involved conversation and so many different factors.
Mhm.
So thank you for asking those questions. We will definitely look at getting that hopefully next month. I'll see if I can squeeze that in and get that started. But I wrote your information down. That way we can look at what's available and have that conversation, have the expert on there that can
Yeah.
dive deep into those questions. All right, so do we have any other questions for Jen or for Lisa?
There's another question that came up.
You're on mute, Lisa.
What? Hello?
Oh, there, I can hear you.
Okay. Do you think, here's another question just came up. Do you think group therapies on social skills are good if they mix ASD with ADHD patients?
I think, group therapy for social skills is tricky because a lot of times it's not, do they know the skill? It's, can they use the skill in the setting that they're going to encounter today, tomorrow, next week, a year from now? So a lot of what goes wrong with our kids is not that they don't know the skills. It's that matching the skills to the setting at a pace that matches what's going on in the setting. A lot of times, the need for the skill kind of comes and goes, and they're still trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? Who's here? What's here? What is expected of me here? And so I think it's hard to really drill down to that individual level in a group social skills. Now, I think for foundational for younger kids kind of growing up into it, they can be really helpful because that is a group and there's opportunities to practice perspective taking and turn taking and all those things that can happen in any group. But as far as the transferable skills, I think it can be really tricky. And with ASD kids and ADHD kids, sometimes it's the same skills that they're working on, other times not. So I don't think I would necessarily advise against combining those two diagnoses in a group, but just understanding that the application of what's going to come out of a group might be limited.
And I think that's a great point too, because one of the things as far as just even when you're researching and looking at how do they bring them together, how do they work with the students as a group and individually, what's the philosophies? Because everyone has different philosophies in their approach to working with kids. So what's that fundamental foundation of how they, is it behavior focused, cognitive focused, kind of taking the whole person into perspective from what's causing, some of the different reactions or behaviors, or getting them from whatever they're trying to focus on. So I love that, and making sure, one of the things is finding how long somebody's been doing the social skills groups, what that looks like, and possibly even asking for references or referrals from parents who've taken it before. How did your child, because I know, again, this process, and you can spend so much money on different services and get so involved from that perspective, that to really find, your top 5 questions of what you really want your child to gain, to learn, to grow, and to make sure to interview the proprietors and the professionals on what they're doing, why they're doing it, what success they've had, what does that look like? Because again, it is a lot to look at and to consider. There was another one. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, can I step in here too, just from the behavior analyst perspective? I think that what both Tiffany and Jen are saying is right on target. And what you're probably going to want to look for is a program. I think the ASD and the ADHD those people are frequently working on similar life skills, tasks, and social skills. And what you might want to look for is a program where each student in the group has their person, has their behavior therapist or has, you know, somebody who's advocating for them and knows what their program is and attends the group with them and then helps them take it out on the road at their pace, making sure that they're having, like, I loved what Jen said about a paved on-ramp, giving them a gentle exposure into the real world from the social skills group into taking that into public places with a lot of support, with a slow pace, with getting the student challenged to their level of their place of growth, and not pushing them too quickly, but really giving them a lot of space and a lot of time for practicing those and having success as much as possible in those new scenarios.
Yeah, yeah, great, great information and feedback. There is a question too, as far as, you know, how do families find resources in the community to support neurodiverse young adults? That's a great question. Guiding Bright Minds is continuing to adding tons of different resources, information of events that are going on there. If you're looking for autistic support, I know that the Autism Society of Colorado has a ton of support groups for young adults. They have really shifted their focus, which is great, because I know there's so much focus on the younger kids and early intervention and things like that. And it feels like that the young adults. So I would definitely start looking at the Autism Society of Colorado's website for the support groups. Peak Parent Center, I know, has a lot of different things, developmental pathways. So there's definitely a lot of those organizations. Revel is another one that has programs for young adults. So some great tools and resources, and all those are listed as part of the community members on, you know, Guiding Bright Minds as far as some of those services. So I would definitely look in that area of support. So I know we're getting to the top of the hour. Any final thoughts and comments, Lisa and Jen, that you'd like to add?
I see a couple of questions in the chat. Someone asking about the program Unstuck and On Target. And, you know, I know the folks who created that program. They're very knowledgeable about executive function. So I would say it's definitely a best practices, reputable kind of program if it's implemented with fidelity. And it tends to target maybe upper elementary through maybe early high school kids, although I think the principles in it could be adapted to older teens. Yeah, so thumbs up for Unstuck and On Target. And then contact for a parent of a recent Temple Grandin graduate to chat about their experience. Lisa, I think we could ask if we had some parents who would be willing. I know we have parents all the time who, you know, are talking to prospective families who are exploring our school. So I'm sure we could find an alumni parent who would be willing to chat. So Tiffany, can we get that information back to you and you can share it maybe?
Yes, absolutely. Let me get that down.
I'm writing that down too on my to-do list to find some people. Yeah.
All right, and then I will circle back with you, Monica, with that contact information, and we'll get that up for you. Thank you for asking. Thank you for noticing that chat. Sorry, I missed that. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions or comments coming in. Thank you both so much for your time. Thank you to everyone taking time into your day. I know it's a lot of information, so appreciate you looking to seek further knowledge. So thank you all. Watch out for our next update on the webinar coming, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.